Hello, class. This is Prelude 1, The Enjoyment of Music, 13th edition. I'll try and keep this quick, which is nearly impossible. All right, and I've added some slides. This is the first slide that I've added here, and this is really the gist of the course. It's a music history survey, and we're going to listen to music from all of these style periods and trying to learn the different style periods. Middle Ages, 400 to 1450, Renaissance, 1450 to 1600, Baroque period, 1600 to 1750, Classical period, 1750 to 1825, the Romantic period, 1820 to 1900, and the 20th century and beyond is 1900 to present. It's basically divided from 1900 through World War II, around 1940, and then from World War II to present. Can you learn the different styles of music and art that are coincident and poetry and architecture? They all are parallel. And sometimes the dates are not exactly the same. A certain style period may start in literature earlier or later than perhaps the same style period in painting or in music. And we'll be going over that over and over. Regarding listening to music, this is what the slide is. Listening to music. There are different ways to listen to music, and we all do it. You can listen to music and not even pay attention to it, right? And we do that a lot of times. It's kind of background music. Or we can listen to music and just relax and just enjoy it. It's like, what is going on here? I don't care. It's entertaining to me. And then you can listen to music and pay attention to what is going on with great detail and say, oh, this is the first section, and now this is the second section. Oh, and I hear that melody again, so we must be back to that first section, et cetera, et cetera. In the textbook, they have, for every listening example, there is a listening guide, and it will give details as far as what to listen for. And it's very helpful to use these listening guides when you listen to the piece of music that is selected for you to listen to. Is this person listening to the music? In what way? Is she concentrating and listening to the music? Is she actually looking at somebody else and not listening to the music at all? We don't know what's going on in her mind. But listening to music is very distracting if you're trying to do something else. And the question is it a good idea to try and to study and listen to music? Is that helpful? Or should you study with silence? And for me, I cannot read a book when music is going on because I listen to the music and I can't read the book. Anyway, there's been a lot of studies that have taken place in Russia and the United States as far as does listening to music help you learn another subject. For instance, if you are studying a language and you're reading, does it help to listen to music? And there's different conclusions which have been drawn. We'll talk about that in another video. Art, right? This is, it says, the sounds wafting through the window are clearly her kind of music. And this is a painting by Roy Lichtenstein from 1965. And very distinctive artist, right? If you are into art and appreciation. Uh, One time I was in New York City, and I've been there many times. And in a certain district, they have these shops that sell art on consignment. And I went in there, and there was this huge painting. I mean, I swear it was like 6 feet tall and maybe 10 feet wide. And it was like what you're looking at here, not the same picture, but you could, say, that's Roy Lichtenstein. I just could tell right away. And I went up to the desk and I says, I'm not interested in buying that, but I'm curious in how much is that painting? She says, $100,000. I said, okay. We'll learn that music has changed, of course, and styles have changed. Instruments have changed. Ensembles have changed. And this is what style is made up of, all those things. And it's a representation of what society likes. And we have this term early music. We'll see that. Now, that doesn't mean music before noon. Early music means music like before 1600, 1700. And it's quite different than modern music, and it uses different instruments. So if you want to listen to early music, you want to listen to it performed on those same instruments that they originally performed on. It makes it a much more enjoyable experience, and it's quite different when it's performed on modern instruments or the original instruments. And talking about interpretation of music, this is so critical to uh, the listener as far as their enjoyment of the music, is how the music is interpreted. And I think you could compare it maybe to somebody reading a poem. And the poem could be read in many different ways, but the words don't change. And so the poem, the person that's reading or reciting that poem is usually going to be dedicated to the intent that the poet had and what the message he's trying to get across, or the sense or feeling, or whatever. So interpretation is huge as far as the end result with the music. You have to give uh, respect to the composer and want to do what he wanted, but there's still a huge room for interpretation. And I always say music would never, if it's performed live and then performed live again, it will never be exactly the same. Music is a very popular source of entertainment. We know that, and live music is very special. In El Paso, we have two great sources of classical music. When we use the word term classical, it's not a good term, because we'll see classical is one particular style period, but oftentimes we use the word classical in a generic way. This mean that we're going to the theater, the concert hall, and we're going to sit, and music's going to be performed on the stage, and it's written at, at a different time, and so it's we call it classical music. And there are certain standards and traditions, the way people dress and the way things are done, and typically, a soloist is allowed to wear colors, where the people in the orchestra, you can see here, they wear black and white generally, but a soloist is allowed to wear colors. So this lady is a wonderful pianist, and I think her name is Lang. No, Yisa Wang, right? And so she received a lot of criticism because she wore this dress to perform, let's say, Beethoven on the piano with orchestra. And some people thought it was a good idea, and some people thought it was a bad idea. What do you think? What is this slide? I think this is an important slide. Oh, this is from the El Paso Symphony Orchestra, right? Concert etiquette. And this is throwing this in here. Look at what it says. Never clap until the conductor puts her hands down at her side, indicating that all movements of the piece have concluded. Many times a piece has many movements, and it's like chapters in a book. And the book is not over until all the chapters or scenes in a play. It's not over, although they handle things differently in that setting. But in concert music, generally we wait until all of the movements are performed before we applaud. And in other time periods, that was not the case. That's the way we do it now. But in other times, if people were excited, they just clapped and then required them to perform the piece over and over, sometimes 10, 15 times, honestly. But nowadays it's standard procedure. And so when people clap before the whole piece has been performed, it's usually considered to be rude to the performers. And it's okay because we know that people don't know any better and they're enjoying the music. But the proper thing to do is wait. And if you don't know, don't clap until somebody else claps. It says, when the conductor begins a piece, it is important to be quiet so the musicians can hear any last minute instructions. And we'll talk about the other things that are appropriate for attending a symphony orchestra. So 2 organizations in El Paso, the El Paso Symphony Orchestra, which I generally get season tickets, and I have this year. They do 3 concerts in the fall and 3 concerts in the spring, and they perform at the Plaza Theater downtown El Paso. If you haven't been there and gone to the symphony orchestra, you should put it on a thing to do because they're quite good, and there's no substitute for live music. And the other group is the El Paso Pro Musica, with Zul Bailey is the artistic director, and he's a world-class cellist, plays all over the world, and you need to take advantage of hearing this man play because he has many CDs. He's a Grammy award winner, and we'll talk about him some more. Okay, genre. All right, this is a very important term that we're going to be using over and over. A general term describing the standard category and overall character of a work. And you can divide things in many different ways in different categories. And I kind of say it's like groups of things that have similarities. And you could have different kinds of books, right? And you could have an almanac. What's an almanac? And the genre of almanac books, the genre of dictionaries, and the different kinds of dictionaries of general words, dictionaries of technical terms, dictionaries of musical terms. So those would all be a certain genre of dictionaries. Or fiction, right, is a genre, or nonfiction is a genre. In movies, we could say documentaries are a genre, or dramas are a genre. And then you could further say, well, I want just documentaries on sports. So that would be a specific genre. Or black and white movies that were documentaries. So you're narrowing it down to fewer and fewer things, but there are many examples that fit into that genre. And so that's how we're going to use that term genre. Very important. Okay, in a general explanation of music, and this is from Frank Zappa, and you should know who Frank Zappa was. And let me move this. It says that in one of his books, he wrote many books, and he says, what actually makes something art? He says the frame is what makes something art. and it's in a crude way, right? The most important thing in art is the frame. For painting, literally. For other arts, figuratively, because without this humble appliance, you can't know where the art stops and the real world begins. You have to put a box around it, because otherwise, what is that crap on the wall? I mean, how many times I know I've been to the community college, and then there's a little platform, and there's some things on there, and it looks like the janitor left his bucket and mop, and then you look and there's a sign in there, and it's somebody's work. It's a sculpture, and you say, oh, okay, but and you could say, I don't like it, or you could say, I like it, or that's cool, or that's stupid, but it's art because that artist says it was art. And how he does that is by putting it on a platform and giving it a name. Okay. So furthermore, Frank Zappa says, if John Cage, a famous composer, which we will study, says, I'm putting a contact microphone on my throat and I'm going to drink carrot juice, and that's my composition, that gurgling sound qualifies that as composition because he put a framer on it and said so. Take it or leave it. I now will this to be music. After that's a matter of taste. Without the frame as announced, it's just a guy swallowing carrot juice. But the point is, what is art? And again, you can like it or you can not like it, but I'm sure you've heard people say, that's not art, that's not music. And Mozart might say that to some of the things he would hear today. But the artist that's performing it is very serious about it, and he does believe it's music. So for us to say it's not is just not it's not relevant. It doesn't matter what we think of its art. They say it's art, and it is art. Again, you can like it or dislike it. What is this here? Okay, so music is sound in time, but it has to have that frame, right? So is a car horn music? Well, it could be, right? If I capture that music and I use it and present it somehow, and it doesn't have to be in any standard way or traditional way, I can do whatever I want, but I can try and make music out of a car horn. And then once I give it a title, car horn number one, you can't say it's not music, because it is music, because it's sound in time, and it's art because it has the frame. Okay, so music, of course, is different for throughout the world, but there's a lot of similarities, and we can break it down. But here is musicality. Is our human perception of two things, right? The pitch and the timbre. And so see this word, T-I-M-B-R, and it's pronounced by musicians timbre, and sometimes people say timbre, and but that's not the preferred pronunciation. And a pitch, of course, is how low or a sound is perceived, and it has to do with physicality, with the vibrations. But timbre is the quality of the music, and so a violin and a clarinet could play the same pitch and the piano, but we would recognize immediately that one is a violin and one is a piano and one is a trumpet, although they could play the same pitch. And so that's what timbre is. So timbre is a lot of different things, right? When little babies recognize the timbre of their mother's voice, and they have an emotional response to the timbre of that voice, can recognize it, and the mother for the baby as well. If you hear a growling bear that has a certain timbre and it creates a certain emotion in you right away, right? And it's anyway, we'll go on with that. So sound is literally little puffs of air that are vibrating through the air, right? Pushing each other. And some are big puffs, and that's slow, and some are many puffs that are crowded together. Interesting thing about physics here is that sound travels just 1,100 feet per second, where the light travels at 186,000 miles per second. And that's why when there's a lightning storm, you will see the flash of light pretty much instantaneously that lightning strikes. But we won't hear the sound of the lightning, the thunder, we call it, for several seconds. And you can actually count from the time you see the light, 1, 2, 3, and multiply it by 1,100, and you'll know how far away that lightning strike was. Here is something that's mind-boggling. Stephen Hawking, remember him? The man in the wheelchair who was one of the greatest physicists of all time. He says, before the Big Bang, there was no time. That hurts my mind to think about. This slide I probably don't need here, but Pythagoras, right? The same guy that did the c squared plus a squared plus b squared, did a lot of research in music and to explain things. The overtone series, what is that? It's like the rainbow, is what it is. Like in light, we have we break it down into the spectrum with the different colors, Vib Guyot or Roy G. Biv, however you remember it. But sound can be divided also into a rainbow of a collection of pitches that makes the timbre. So if a fundamental pitch is 100 cycles per second, there are also these other groups of cycles, 200, 300, whatever, multiples of it that are stacked up. And it's what creates the difference between the clarinet sound and the violin sound, is that the timbre is this collection of pitches. We're talking about that. This is interesting, and it's from a music theory book. And here is what I think is really cool. Number 2, he says, there is no progress in art. While it may at first seem plausible that, for example, a late Romantic symphony is superior to a simple 10th century plain chant, careful consideration may prove the contrary. A comparison of progress in the arts to, for instance, progress in the sciences is inappropriate. So even though the Middle Ages music, we might say, is simple, the music is as high a level as has ever been achieved. And it's about aesthetics. Aesthetics is a word we'll use that means the study of the beautiful. And that's what style is, to appreciate beauty. So Igor Stravinsky, one of the most famous 20th century, top 5 in the 20th century, okay? We'll listen to his music. He said, to be a good listener, you must acquire a musical culture. You must be familiar with the history and development of music. You must listen. To receive music, you have to open your ears and wait for the music. You must believe that it is something you need. To listen is an effort, and just to hear has no merit. A duck hears also. some musical categories, genre. There are hundreds, right? So a couple terms. Liturgy is what makes up a religious ceremony, and a fixed set of ceremonies, words, etc., that are used during public worship in a religion. Okay, two major terms we're going to use over and over again: the contrast between program music and absolute music. So absolute music is free from extra musical implications, usually excludes vocal music and music of a definite emotional character. It's music that doesn't try and do anything other than entertain you. It's not supposed to tell a story or recreate some kind of event that took place. It's just what it is. But program music, on the other hand, has a program. Instrumental music generally is program music, or can be a program music, endowed with literary or pictorial associations, especially popular in the 19th century. It has a story or a program that is told by the music, and it could be written for a solo instrument or any size ensemble, right? Ballet is program music. Because it tells a story. Anyway, lots of music is program music. It's sacred music and secular music. It's either this or that. It's either sacred music or it's secular music. Sacred music, just like it says, music that has to do with the liturgy of the Christian church or any other church for that matter. Examples, we'll study mass, oratorio, cantata, motet, plain chant, and those are words that you will learn what they mean. Secular music is just non-sacred, and the examples that we will study would be like chanson, madrigal. That's secular music. And this whole part one is, I call it the nuts and bolts of music, and then we'll start studying the style, the different style periods. So there's a chapter on melody, rhythm, harmony, how musical sounds are organized, texture, musical form, expression, text and music, instrument and vocal melodies, families, Western versus non-Western music, different kinds of ensembles, style and function of music, writing about music. Okay. So those are the chapters we're going to go on. And anyway, that's the end of Prelude 1. And you can do the worksheet for that.